Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Global Adventure Show with travel writer Debbie Stone. Well, everyone, I call her the fire monkey for a good reason. Debbie Stone, the travel writer, goes around the world. I cannot keep up with how many countries, continents she has been to. I think she's probably done all continents. We'll have to ask her and keep up with that. But before she hops over to another country, we've got her back on Big Blend Radio on her monthly podcast here every fourth Tuesday, talking about coastal Mississippi. And I know that she has been through the Gulf Shore area. I know that she's familiar with this region, but she's done like Mobile, Alabama. I remember her doing some of that. I think she did Lafayette, Louisiana. Then she just kind of went a little bit west and went to coastal Mississippi, which is an awesome area, Nancy, and I love it. We do a lot of coverage actually in Big Blend magazines and Big Blend Radio on this region because why? It totally rocks. And I think that's what Debbie had a good time. She's got a great article. You can read it on blendradioandtv.com. The link is in the episode notes, as are the links to plan your vacation there, which is coastalmississippi.com and whitehousebiloxi.com. We're going to hear if she stayed at the White House. She did. Hey, Debbie, how are you? Fire monkey.
I'm doing great. And yes, coastal Mississippi it really rocks. I mean, I was in Biloxi as a child and I didn't even remember it. It was just so long ago. And really, I have been to Mobile, like you said, but I hadn't been, actually in that coastal Mississippi area for so many years. And it was so much fun to go back and, there's just a rich history there. Plus it's just, miles and miles of white sand beach and, just a lot of colorful traditions there and food and some very hospitable properties and people. So it was a great trip. Lots of fun.
And it's Gulf Shores, National Island Seashores out there too. So it does connect, right? With that for if you love parks. But what I think is so funny is I remember you coming on the show, and this was years ago, talking about Mobile, Alabama as a Mardi Gras destination. But there you are outside of Louisiana again, hanging out in Mardi Gras like places, right? So you learned about carnival season in Mississippi, and because they do celebrate.
Oh, definitely. I think, up and down that coastal area there, it's celebrated. And they have their own traditions and their own, events and festivities. And, there's a wonderful museum there that covers that. And, it's always interesting to find out how different regions, different places, different towns, small and big, celebrate this particular holiday. And, it's fun. And I love the whole I just love the whole celebratory emphasis it is. We were there right before the weekend before Fat Tuesday when all the parades and but the balls have started and the town is decked out in Mardi Gras color and it's just they have the king cakes ready and all that. So it was just fun. It was just fun to be there.
Well, I think too, it's such I want to get into the lighthouse and everything like that, but in Biloxi, I had a good time in Biloxi, a few good times in Biloxi, but, when you think about the fun part of Mississippi and it is the music, and that's why I say it really rocks. And you went to one of the newest destinations, I think, to listen to live music in coastal Mississippi, and got to see a really killer blues band, which I'm a little jealous of. So you went to Ground Zero Blues Club, and I think that is one of their newer clubs. I could be wrong, but
I don't have the date that it was open. It's a great club. I was really impressed with it. Right in downtown Biloxi, and it just it's the whole Mississippi Blues Trail, and part of that whole experience is, of course, if you follow the trail and you want to stop at various places. But, you also have to really go and listen to live music if you're there. I mean, it's really the blues capital, so to speak. And yeah, the live show was great. I saw Rashad, the blues kid, there,
Mm-hmm.
and his band, and it was a rockin' show. It was really good, very just upbeat, but also very sultry and funky, all of the above. And it was a great time. But it just kind of complemented the whole blues thing to be there and to see it live.
You went to the 100 Members Debating Benevolent Association, the DBA Hall, the 100 Men DBA Hall. And this is really historic when you think about this because Mississippi has this incredible blues trail. I have the actual book. And as many people know, Nancy and I, my mom and I travel the country documenting parks and public lands. So we don't have room for much in our car. Like, honestly, we're on the road full time. But this book is allowed in the car as a fixture because it is the book written by Steve Chesborough, who was on our show when he first wrote it probably 15 years ago, maybe 16, 17 years ago. And I still have this book because it's the Mississippi Blues Trail. And to me, I kind of feel like I could just move to Mississippi for a year or two and just do that. Like I'm like serious about it. Like I'm such a blues fiend. Like I don't know how to explain it, but going to the 100 Men DBA Hall is on my list as one of the places you have to go to. You got to, if you love blues, you must go there, right?
Yeah, it has such a wonderful, it has such an interesting history. It's in Bay St. Louis, which is one of the towns in coastal Mississippi, and the building. It used to be, or well, it was set up to be a hub for African American social life and entertainment. So there were a lot of greats that came there to perform, like Ray Charles and James Brown and Earl King and Etta James, and they all came there, and they used it as an entertainment venue for a way for this 100 Men DBA, this organization, to generate money so they could help members of the community. And today, it's a place that still, has live music. It also does a lot of workshops and special events. So, it really is a piece of history, and it's one of those things that I even put it in my story. Even if the blues, if that's not your music, your vibe, you're there in Mississippi. And to me, it's like, okay, it's the home of the blues. Embrace it and go listen to it and check it all out. And I guarantee it'll be, if it's not even your thing music-wise, you're still gonna have a wonderful time because it's a fascinating.
You're going to get the feeling of it,
yes,
more than anywhere else. You're going to get the feeling,
You will,
yeah.
And it's part of the fabric of the culture, and. Yeah. I think that that's really important as a visitor or a traveler, that you experience those kinds of things because they are so integral to the culture.
Well, also, I mean, Mississippi, you went to like Biloxi, and that's an area that also had a lot of entertainers and a lot of casinos and a lot of entertainment. I think no, I've been to Biloxi a few times now that I think of it. But it was in 2012 on our way just before we started our Love Your Park store, we stopped at the Hard Rock Hotel in Biloxi. And we did win money, by the way, and had Bloody Marys. Anyway, when you're traveling, it's great to park your car in the casino parking lots because they have security. So anyway, and if there's a casino there and you can get a Bloody Mary and lunch, like that's okay. But they had a whole the Beatles car and experience. Priscilla, our sock monkey, got photos taken. Yeah. And they had this, I mean, the rock and roll, like I wanted to always own a Hard Rock hotel when I was a teenager. That was kind of a goal. Anyway, and then I realized, no, that's not my thing. But it's definitely not anything to do with serving the public. Is not happening with me. And I respect everybody who does. Oh my gosh, triple, quadruple. But the Hard Rock Hotel there had this amazing, I know they changed it out and so much has happened since then, but this, oh my gosh, they had Tom Petty and Annie Lennox and David Bowie and, James Brown stuff in there. And I was just like, it was like I got into this little museum for like nothing. and won money and basically paid for my Bloody Mary and lunch. Like seriously, and my parking. It was a great day. Notice
Well,
I said that an entire day because you know what happened when once you got there, like then we were like, maybe we should spend the night.
well, it's, the the best place to go to start if you're in Biloxi is a visitor center, and it's not just a visitor center where you can get all sorts of information and advice and suggestions, blah blah blah. But it really has exhibits and displays, so it's really a place to take a deep dive into the city's history, the culture, and its connection to the Mississippi. And this was a place where many people from all over and lots of diverse cultures came, and a lot of them came to work in the thriving seafood industry. Then they had this whole big dockside gaming scene and the casinos that were established on the beachfront, and so it became known as the Las Vegas of the South. And all these, like you said, big name entertainers came. They performed there, but there's just these people that came from all over. They stayed, and they brought richness once again to the diversity of culture of this particular region. So the visitor center is a great place to kind of get started, get kind of a great introduction. And then that visitor center, which is in this gorgeous building that's right fronting the waterfront, is right across the street from the Biloxi Lighthouse, which is very iconic, one of the most photographed sites in the area. You can take a short guided tour and climb up the beacon to the top and get this wonderful view. And you can also learn about, the history of this. And what I found was interesting, it dates back to the mid-1800s, but it was operated by several female lightkeepers. This one woman, Maria Youngins, who served in the position for 53 years. What happened, though, we know that Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005 and really did a number on the whole area there, but also on the lighthouse in terms of damage. And they were able to restore it. They were able to reopen it about 5 years later. So, going to the top of it, realizing, getting this view, getting this information, seeing the water lines from the different hurricanes that have gone back as far as 100 years.
Wow.
It was fascinating to see, hear, and understand, and be so glad and feel good that this stalwart, iconic landmark was able to be restored and is still there.
Well, I love this too about women's history. You've got to think about the people that have performed in the area, right? You're talking about Etta James and everyone.
Right.
I know in your article you even bring up Jerry Lewis. That's amazing to me too. Jerry Lee Lewis. His sister was on our show, and she used to perform with him all the time. That
Awesome.
was, yeah. But when you go back to some of the women's history, you've got one of the folk artists in the area too that you went to. I've just got to bring this up because it's Women's History Month, y'all. It's March.
That's
Even though every
absolutely
month
right.
to me is Women's History Month, but anyway.
But that's a great segue, because in Bay St. Louis is the Alice Mosley Folk Art Museum. Now, I was not aware of Alice Mosley. I didn't know. I know folk art, but I didn't know about her. So it was this wonderful introduction to this fascinating woman who has a great history about, she only started painting at the age of 65, and she started it as a hobby because she was caring for her mother who had Alzheimer's, and she needed kind of a release or something to do that was maybe a self-expression. And so she painted everything around her, the world around her, and she showed Southern life in the country. And they say that her paintings are literary because each scene tells a story. And she selected a title for her work before she even started creating it. She never sketched. She just put brush to canvas using acrylics and just painted. And somebody saw her paintings and put her in a show, and they sold out all the paintings, and that kind of was the start. And she passed away in 2004, but her work remains. There's a wonderful video of her talking about her paintings and herself and the life, and she's got some great wise words and some witticisms and some humor, and it was a delightful experience. And the museum is in this train depot in Bay St. Louis, so it's also kind of a historic place as well to have this. But I loved it. It was great.
I love hearing about this, because women go through so many changes in life. And, you feel like, oh, I can't do another new thing. Yes, you can. And we have our Women Making History podcast, which now, of course, this episode needs to go on now and will be, because why not? Well, no, because it just proves that we can do what we want no matter our age. Maybe, we're maybe not going to, climb a skyscraper unless that's your main focus, right? If you're going to be Spider-Man or something up there. But this shows a woman can still do something in her 60s or 70s.
Yes,
I think that's huge.
Age does not matter. Age should not matter,
No, it doesn't.
It's phenomenal. I knew a Seattle area woman who, at the age of 70, was chosen for a show, a series, Northern Exposure, years and years ago, which was filmed
I love
the Seattle area. Well, I was an extra on that show.
No way! I went to Roslyn. I went to the town Roslyn, in Washington State, and I went to the bar. I did. And I waited for the moose to come down the street, but it didn't. But I saw the radio thing, and it was right when we were beginning our podcast. And I thought, why don't we just move here and we'll do the podcast there? But then John Corbett wasn't there. But anyway, you were an. Did you do it in Roslyn?
One episode. It was done in the soundstage in Redmond, Washington, which is where they did a lot of their work. But it's so anyway, I knew Peg, and Peg was the
Peg.
The Peg, yes. And she was she lived in my community, and she appeared in community shows, but she didn't start acting until much, much later in life, and then look what happened. So anything can happen, and I love stories like that because it's just proof positive that's age is just not to be, not to focus on. But don't focus on it. Don't focus.
Yeah, focus on your joy, because it is.
Yes.
And this is the thing: is travel. This is these stories come out when you travel someplace, and it's like I didn't know that Roslyn was that community where they were like that. I always thought it was in Alaska. I had no idea. I think we were just getting Google at the time, when it came out. And I loved it because of the moose and the people, and because it kind of connected. It sounds weird, but I grew up in Africa, man, and it kind of felt like Africa because it was a small town with a small amount of people.
With a lot of quirky people and a lot of fun, interesting things that happen. But I lived in Alaska, so when I moved to Washington and that show started, my husband and I would watch it, and we knew it was being filmed in Washington, but we're like, hey, this could be an Alaskan community.
It's like it was one of those things that it was like a religious you got to watch thing.
Not
like we didn't have TiVo or anything back then, but it was a big deal. But really, I didn't know until we went to see a friend who was a camp host. And there was a lake, not Kisatchie, I'm now in Louisiana because of Mississippi. It begins with a K, and it's up by Snoqualmie, I think it is.
Yeah,
anyway.
Snoqualmie.
It's Lake Kincaid, or it begins with a K. But anyway, he was a camp host, and he was all excited about this because he newly retired and got in our big, nice Silver Bullet RV Airstream. And he was all excited to be a camp host until he decided to actually rake up the pine needles. And then the camp people said, no, that's why people come here, put them back. Anyway,
exactly.
Rest in peace, Frank. But we went to see him, and we went all over. And he's like, we got to go to Roslyn. I'm like, well, okay, what's in Roslyn? And he's like, it's Northern Exposure town. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Let's go now. You know, and
Oh,
if
yeah,
we weren't
yeah.
traveling, at that point, I mean, now we have Google and everything. I wouldn't have never have known that I would end up that day at one of my favorite TV shows, the place. Like, that's this
Yeah.
beauty of travel. And what you've experienced in Mississippi, I've experienced a little portion of, but like in coastal Mississippi, going to where these famous greats were there to me is everything. Just because it changed the landscape of music. You know, you
Of
think
course.
about, go to Biloxi, go down to where you were at Ground Zero, and then all these places. It's like the past, the present, and the future is all meeting in one place where you were in coastal Mississippi in music. And
And
that means,
it,
for me as a traveler, it means everything. And a blues lover is like everything. It's
and you
everything.
know, beyond the whole blues scene is this wonderful architecture that I think people should be aware of. There's a lot of historical buildings that are on the historic register of historic places, and they will give you a map, that you can take a self-guided walking tour of
Mm.
the downtown area, and you can note, and they'll tell you what how old the house was, who lived in it, and the type of architecture that's there. And it's just to me, you could see Spanish colonial, you can see fishermen's cottages, you can see
Mm.
Victorian, and porticos, and neoclassical revival, and all these different architectural styles. I think for architecture buffs, it's a great place to go, because there's so many examples of a variety of different architecture. And then as you're walking, you're going to take note of other things, and interesting shops and restaurants. Of course, one of my favorite streets though is it's called Rue Magnolia, and it's just a charming small
Mm.
little street with these wood frame houses on both sides of the walkway, and the buildings have been adapted for other uses, and now some of them are interesting shops. There's also a few local businesses. Also, the one thing to note when you're walking around town, you're going to see lots of murals, and it's great because they give the city lots of color, dots and splashes of color, and there's some people in the murals. There's there's items or things or focuses that will give you some insight into the area. So it's kind of fun to look at those, and there's a whole map of those which you can kind of follow along as well.
I love that. I mean, the architecture, you've got to think about the history of, coastal Mississippi, and the architecture tells you the story of the people, of who landed there and why. And New Orleans, I mean, from what I understand is that, if you had the finances and you lived in New Orleans, you went summering in Biloxi and
Oh,
maybe
it was a
had a
great,
second
yeah.
house there.
Oh, definitely. For people want to be on the beach, and the beach is a huge attraction, of course. And visitors come from various places, and they come to the beach. They want to hang out on those beautiful white sand beaches. They also, a lot of the people come for the casinos. They come for different holiday events, and they come for the food because this is a good foodie town. And they come to get out on the water as well. And speaking of that, I did a Biloxi shrimping trip, and although this was not shrimping season, we did hear all about shrimping season. We did see a net get cast out, brought in not shrimp but other types of sea creatures. There was a tank that they had some shrimp in, so that they took them out. We could look at them and actually inspect them and see different parts of the shrimp. And it was an interesting experience to be out on the water, because the water is such an important part of this area, and the seafood industry is a huge part of this area as well.
Oh, okay. I want to go right into that. We still have to talk about where you stayed, and we've got to talk about some more art, but let's go right into that, because the food, I know how you get excited when there is fresh seafood or fish on your plate. And apparently you were in a little bit of heaven.
Oh, I was in a lot of heaven. I think, being a pescatarian and really appreciating fresh seafood, especially living in Santa Fe, which is, landlocked. We're not near any kind of big water. And to me, it was like having a smorgasbord of just, for me, I was in heaven totally. And, there's so many wonderful restaurants. I will identify a few that were some of my favorites. One is Field Steak and Oyster Bar. Another was Catch 110. Another was the Siren Social Club. Another was Mary Mahoney's Old French House. There was just everything on the menu. They just, from clams and oysters and crab and shrimp and all different kinds of fish, prepared in a myriad of different ways. And I loved it. I loved eating there. It was just something really to look forward to. And, of course, there's, wonderful craft cocktails to go with this, and a lot of fun southern types of dishes. You're going to get the fried green tomatoes, but you'll get them topped with crab meat maybe, or crawfish. Or you'll, get different, maybe you'll get grilled oysters, or maybe you'll get, surf and turf if you would like some meat with your seafood, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, biscuits. I have to put a plug in for biscuits. You have to have biscuits. And the Greenhouse Biloxi does a good job with the biscuits. I had sweet potato biscuits, and they were like, oh, yum, yum.
Well, okay, you mentioned cocktails, but you went into like a speakeasy kind of place in Gulfport.
Right, and that was the Siren Social Club, and that was really, really cool. It's this, I don't know, it had these wonderful handcrafted cocktails. It had a great raw bar, and then it had these handmade pastas. It had, caviar service, and it was a kind of a fun, hip atmosphere and great service, and just really, really top-notch food. It was a recommendation, and it was truly, just a highlight there.
That is cool. So a lot of good food. We'll get to your lodgings, but we're going to backtrack because you talked about being from Santa Fe. So, seafood is not in your backyard. However, you do have Georgia O'Keeffe, but you found a different O'Keeffe in Mississippi. See, that was a good segue. Now that was good, right?
That was a good one. Yes,
I planned it. In fact, this whole show this way. Just kidding.
It's perfect. It was the Orr O'Keeffe Museum of Art, and
either or, yeah.
It's either or, and it's a cool museum. I think the architecture was designed by architect Frank Gehry, who we know very well, renowned architect, and it looks like these large, I don't know, as I said, maybe bongo drums, but they are, look like they're steel color, and inside you'll find these displays and exhibits about this artist named George Orr, and he was a pioneer for stoneware ceramics in the country and a leader in this modernist movement. He's known as the Mad Potter of Biloxi. He was very experimental. He defied conventional notions of what ceramics should be. He was also equally as unconventional in terms of his appearance. He had this very large and unruly mustache. So anyway, you can go into these different buildings and check out his work along with other artists that have on display. Some of them are rotating exhibitions. There's also kind of a shoe fly, which if people don't know what that is, it's a form of Mississippi architecture that looks like a gazebo that's built around like a large tree, like an oak tree, and you can go up and get a great view of the landscape. It was fun to do that. But that is such an interesting museum, and I had never heard of Georgia Orr, so that was a real nice introduction, just like with Alice Mosley.
That's the thing. Travel leads you to all these stories. That's the beauty of it, I think sometimes it's hard to we're in the information age, obviously, right? With all we can get on Google and Facebook and then fake news or
Absolutely.
whatever. But the reality is getting out there and
Right.
finding these stories and actually going beyond the page and
Sure.
being able to see someone's art. You know,
Yes. Yes.
I think, that you were able to stand in places where women, like, just going back to that women's history thing, since it's now going to be on the Women Making History podcast,
Right.
being able to actually stand where they performed and that they went through hell to get there.
Yes.
They
Yes.
did. And,
Of course.
for, the artist that you were talking about, I mean, for her, she went from being a slave to being a folk artist. It wasn't just an overnight thing either, right?
She went from what? I didn't catch
No,
your
no,
last.
I may be wrong now. I thought
No.
she went from slave. She wasn't a
N-
slave. No,
No, no,
she
no,
was.
no,
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 no, no. That was
no.
someone else. Sorry. No, I have somebody else in mind. Sorry. But no, but those stories of these women, and men too, you get a more tangible feel when you're in the place. And that's the power of travel, is you really get to understand people more when you get there, when you go to those places
Right.
as much as you can. So
Right.
I love this. I love your experience in Mississippi. Would you
Yes.
go back? Is there
Oh
something you want to
gosh.
go back for?
I think I would, and I would explore more of the little towns along the
Mm.
coastal area because it spans 62 miles, basically, along the Gulf of Mexico, overlooking that Mississippi, and comprises 3 different counties and 12 different cities within there. So there's plenty of places to explore, and I only
But
focused a lot on Biloxi and Bay St. Louis and a little bit in Gulfport. So there's plenty more to explore there. I think that would be fun to do, and a lot more blues to do.
well, where you stayed though, at the White House Hotel, not at the White House, right?
Right.
That seems like it was a nice base property to be in, with views
Yes.
and close proximity to everything in Biloxi
Yes, and then it's
and
just
charm.
it's like 40 minutes to drive to Bay St. Louis, and so you're there and everything can easily be reached, and this is a historic boutique property. It overlooks the beautiful Mississippi, and like you said, a great prime location. It's a restored hotel and has a great past. It's one of those places that oozes the southern charm, as I said. And as I wrote in my story, looking out of the property, I could feel like the spirits of debutantes around me and picture Scarlett O'Hara, coming down the stairs. And so, yeah, it's a nice place to stay, and I also really appreciate boutique properties, and especially historic ones at that.
Oh, that's awesome. Staying in special properties, and especially when hospitality, it's so nice when there's people there for you too. Like, just
Oh,
nice.
absolutely. Absolutely. And people that are, welcoming and willing to be helpful. And, that's just, it's, to me, that's all a part of travel that makes it so much, more enjoyable.
I do want to say, when I was talking about the slave site, I got it twirled around. It was about the Pleasant Reed House, that was
Oh,
built
yes,
by Pleasant
yes.
Reed. It was just, I read something real quick that I shouldn't. It was about Reed, not Alice. Alice is two different, two different people, but Reed
Right,
was, yeah,
right.
but
He
he
was
is important to mention. He's important.
Yes, and the Pleasant Reed House is on the Orr O'Keefe Museum property, and it's a like an 1880s shotgun style home. It was built by a former slave, Pleasant Reed. He was the first freed slave to purchase his own land in Biloxi. Unfortunately, the original house was destroyed by Katrina, but the curators were fortunately able to save a lot of the photos and archival materials. So it has been rebuilt in that style style, and now features some exhibits on the local African American history, and kind of serves as an interpretive center. So yeah, that's definitely, you were looking at that.
I was looking at that. Yeah, I had it. I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that part about her, and I was like, what? But no, I know. Sorry about that. We were reading articles and talking at the same time, but it's like you had such an amazing, and there's also record shops. Like, listen, any place that has a record shop, they rock. Like, that's what I said. Like, she had an amazing time. Debbie did.
Yes.
Can't wait for everyone. Next month, you're going to hear about the Fire Monkeys' adventures in Minneapolis. Yes, maybe she did throw her hat with, Mary Tyler Moore. You'll find out next month. So take a listen to that. I love doing those conversations with you about Minneapolis. Minnesota, I think we don't do as much conversation about the upper Midwest of our country, even the northern states. I think because of summer and winter, right? It's like, oh, only go in summer and we don't know anything else about it. Like, it's such a short season. But really, the Midwest has some beauty and charm. I have fallen in love with the Midwest. And I think, Minnesota is a gorgeous state, wouldn't you say? And also the Midwest. Debbie, I know you've traveled the Midwest too. It's just underrated.
I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Chicago, So,
yeah, that's right.
I have a personal, I've got a personal bias towards that. No, I have a personal bias because I think that people kind of sometimes forget about the Midwest area because, other than Chicago or some, well-known hubs, but there's a lot of beauty in the Midwest, and there's a lot of really charming small towns and a lot of history there as well. And I think the landscape has its own beauty, so I honestly do feel that, there needs to be more, so that people, will be, I think, more aware of and even more open to traveling through the Midwest.
When you say about its beauty, I mean, even I've done the Midwest in the winters and the brutal winter.
It's still beautiful.
I find beauty in the ice on trees is like something you've never seen, and just rolling hills of snow with red barns covered. And I mean, it's like, wow. And the people are friendly. They're like, I need to get out of the house. Let's have some fun.
It's beautiful. It really has its own sense of beauty, and fall there is gorgeous. It rivals New England, I believe. And you find all these wonderful farm stands, and it's just pumpkin farms, and all the wonderful apple ciders and all that wonderful thing. But I do believe that there is a lot of beauty there, and I think when people really take the time to kind of travel through parts of the Midwest, they will realize it, and so I'm all for the Northwest, for the Midwest,
and the Northwest. We know that,
and the Northwest, and the Southwest, and New England,
York City, and
New England. Yes, yep.
Boy, yeah. Well, she's a traveler, and she's always on the road, and now she's going to be flying the skies for a while. So we can't wait to catch up with you, but travel safe, our friend. And,
all right.
We'll be chatting with you soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Again, just real quick, everyone, the article, from Coastal Mississippi from Debbie is up on blendradioandtv.com, linked in the episode notes, as is coastalmississippi.com. That's the place to really plan your trip. And if you want to stay where Debbie stayed, go to whitehousebiloxi.com and said, hey, the Fire Monkey sent you. Anyway, don't do that. They may look at you weird, but anyway.
They have no idea who that is.
They have no idea, but I would do it anyway just for some fun. You never know. All right. Thanks so much, Fire Monkey.
Safe
travels. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Big Blend Radio's Global Adventures Show with travel writer Debbie Stone. Debbie is here every fourth Tuesday. You can keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.